I always feel very silly doing that. Yeah, very silly. And, but it's very helpful in the editing, and much gratitude to Slate's and sound department. It's, now that I've that's not even a word, dived into this sector of doing like audio, I have a newfound appreciation for sound peeps. So
Me too. Me too.
yeah, but I'm so excited to talk to you, and I've realized that I have like a bit of like a crush on all of the people that come on my show. Like I'm just such a fan of them as people, as professionals, and you are obviously no exception. I think what makes this particularly interesting and exciting for me selfishly is the coaching that we have done together, and how you have changed my life. You've changed my career.
Yeah.
You've changed so much for me this year, and serendipitous timing with COVID. I don't know what I would have done without your guidance. And so, you know, it's really important and special for me to have you on, just because of my own personal journey and the pivots I've been making this year. And so I'm so grateful to be here talking with you and sharing it with the listeners.
Oh, I so appreciate that. I really, I loved our coaching relationship and felt like we had just amazing chemistry and
Yeah.
really good teamwork.
Yeah. I was like, can dating be this easy? Can like just dating be like this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But so I'd love for you to just take us to the beginning of your journey. You know, how did you get to this business and discover that producing was a viable thing?
It was like so many other people, just like so many fits and starts, because like I grew up consuming a massive amount of television. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll be an actor. And I studied at Goodman Theater when I was in high school. And then I went to college and I was like, oh, there are these other things like writers and directors. And so it was literally like those types of missteps. And, but I really came to producing from a place of, in a weird way, of loss, because I was fired from a job that I held for a long time. And then the next job that I was able to get was working for Mike Newell and his producing partner, Cam Jones, and running their television division, and then also, you know, producing the stuff that we were developing. And then I found out, wow, I really love this. I love being
Yeah.
so close to the material.
But so then, like, from when you had access to the business from an acting, more creative perspective, and then you saw there were these other potential paths, did you have a sense of clarity of how you get on that path? Like, how did you make that transition? Because were you born in LA, or how did
I
you even get here?
Yeah, I know. It's like, so I was born in Illinois, and I come from very humble background. My parents never graduated from high school. My mom never even made it through elementary school.
Wow.
My dad was a construction worker. I grew up in a lower income family, and so the idea of entertainment or Hollywood was so foreign. There was nobody in my community who had ever done anything like this. And this is where I love naivete, because I just like, I
Yeah.
didn't know any better. And I was able to go to college, and I studied radio, TV, film. And I feel like I sucked the marrow out of that bone, because any informational interview, like any time someone like from the industry would come to campus, I was right there asking questions. And what I felt like I learned was it's either New York or LA. And because I'm incredibly sophisticated, I was like, oh, I'll go to LA because it's warmer than New York. I don't like the cold.
Hey, the weather has brought many people out here. So
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
definitely like whatever entry point gets you here. So then you come here, and how old were you at this point?
I was like, quote unquote, old. I was 26.
Oh
And
my God. Basically like retirement age.
completely, yeah. Like all of my other like friends, everyone else had moved out right after graduation, and I just wasn't really ready to make the leap for a whole variety
Mm,
of reasons. But
yeah.
I do appreciate, because my first job was as an assistant at an agency, but because I'd had like 4 years of writing and producing educational films in Chicago, I actually felt like I was able to hit the ground running in a way. Like I had developed a level of professionalism. I knew how to problem solve. And what I discovered when I was an assistant is that there's this job called development, where you get to
Mm,
read material and give people thoughts. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like someone will actually pay you for your opinion? And then I was like on this path of, I want a
yeah.
development job. And then I wound up working with Klasky Chupo, the animation company that did Rugrats. And I started up a development department for them. And as much as I love animation, it wasn't like my real passion. And that's when I went to CBS.
I was gonna ask you where the special thanks on the Rugrats movie came from. So I guess
Oh,
that just
you saw
answered
that.
it. Yeah. I was like, that's an interesting, like when you go to your IMDb, it's like there. I was like, that's interesting. But okay, so then you were in the animation world for a bit and you were like, no, I wanna go over here. How did you make that transition and what was the next step?
Yeah, I developed relationships with people at CBS in their children's department, and then they had like a big upheaval. A bunch of executives were let go, and so that created an opportunity. And so I started working in their children's department, and then I had an incredible run at CBS for about 10 years. I was promoted roughly every 18 to 24 months. I moved into primetime, and then I moved into primetime development, and then after 10 years, I was fired, and that was a big rug that was pulled out from underneath me because I did not see that coming.
Talk about that for a minute. I mean, so much of the show is talking about the messy parts of our journeys and how we get through these like insurmountable odds and the downs of the slumps of the business. And so what was that time like? How did you navigate it?
Well, to give a little bit of context, I had just been promoted to running drama development, and I was also having a lot of difficulties in my marriage. My husband and I had separated, and then we reconciled, and then adopted a daughter from China. And so I'm newly head of this very important department. I'm still struggling in my marriage, despite the fact that we had reconciled. I was a new mom, and I was floundering. I was really, really struggling. And I don't think that I wasn't showing up as the best version of myself. And, I really wish that someone that I was working with would have just had the compassion, quite honestly, to pull me aside and say, hey, like, what's happening here? It's like, you're not showing up in the way that we know you. But no one did that. No one had the compassion. And so, yeah, I feel like, could I have been a better executive? Yes. Was I going through an incredibly difficult time in my life? Absolutely.
Yeah. But
and then my dad was dying at the same time. I was like, that was the other big one. Yeah.
Just like, yeah. I mean, that's a lot. And so how long were you, once you were fired, like how long did you take for yourself to realign? And then how did you decide what the next step would be then for yourself?
Yeah. I wanted to move out of LA. I wanted to just abandon ship as quickly as possible. My husband, in all of his grace and wisdom, said, it's absolutely okay if you want to leave and if you want to pivot, but I'm not going to let you run away, because that's what you're doing. And so you need to go like process all of this. And then at the end of it, if you want to make a choice and respond to the situation, but right now you are full of fear, you're upset. It took me, honestly, it took me years. Yeah. I can still remember this clearly because my dad died in October. And then I think it was like right after the funeral. So it was like a week later, then I got the call of, and they had told me in the spring that that they didn't want me doing my job anymore. And that's when my dad got sick. And so they didn't want to fire me while, I'm with my dying dad. And so they waited until he was actually dead, which I really struggle with, because I just wish that they would have just let me go, because it was pain on top of pain on top of pain. It was incredible. And then I started working with Cam and Mike in the spring. And I love Cam and Mike, but to be completely transparent, I took the first job that was offered to me because I was I had no self-esteem. I was really decimated.
Yeah. I mean, but so then it took you obviously some years to heal from that trauma, right?
Yes.
Of the compounded, just all of those things happening at once. That's a lot. And then you were in this job that maybe wasn't necessarily the best fit while you were grieving this loss, right? And processing all of this. And how long were you there before I guess at what point did you finally feel like you could dust it all off and like sort of a phoenix rise from the ashes to enter what feels like, has become this like next chapter of your life that I would assume is like what you're in now, you know, ever
Yeah.
since maybe you left that, you entered this new chapter and you're sort of maybe on the tail end of that or starting a new one, perhaps. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. I, well, I give Cam and Mike a lot of credit because I was so determined to prove that I was somebody and something. And so I just like wanted to hit the ground running and sell a bunch of shows and just prove everybody wrong. And I had 24 pitch meetings and I got 24 no's. And that was devastating as well. So I was like, clearly, I'm not cut out to be a producer at all. And Cam and Mike, and I asked them to release me from my contract, and Cam and Mike said no. And it was the greatest gift. And essentially what they said is, listen, you know, just stop trying to anticipate the marketplace and follow your heart, trust your instincts. And then it became sort of a Hallmark movie. And I wound up selling like, I think it was like 6, 7, 8 shows in a row. It was like bam, 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 bam.
wow.
And then this was in 2008 with the financial crisis, and we lost our funding. So the unfortunately the company went under, but it gave me this new sense of confidence of, okay, if I do listen to Cam and Mike and trust my instincts, I can actually find traction. But the real healing, quite honestly, I mean, I want to say a good 6 years, maybe. I mean, it took me a long time because I didn't have any skill. I didn't have any tools. I did not know how to recover from this. And I don't mean, I want to be very respectful of people who have experienced trauma, but my firing, my marriage, the death of my father, becoming a new mother, it was traumatic. And
Yeah.
and when I started to learn about trauma, I realized it's like I had all of the symptoms of trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can quantify trauma. I think trauma sometimes gets perceived in one light and it's not necessarily so. You know, we all have different traumas we experience and I don't think you can equate, well, your trauma is better than my, or worse than my trauma. It's like it's not a competition, you know, like trauma is trauma and I think it's important to honor that, especially in our business, and this is brilliantly taught to me by you and how much grief and loss there is that we never really process, and I think it's so vulnerable of you and empowering to talk about it so openly and candidly, because I would venture to guess almost everybody listening and everybody who's been in this town long enough has a version of that story for them that they're still like trying to get over this hump in their journey, because it is, as you know, so all consuming that it's kind of impossible to separate, you know, and you have to find these healthy ways to cope with all of that so that you can build the stamina and the longevity for what is required to sustain the ups and downs of the lifestyle of this business, of the producing hustles, particularly, you know?
Yeah. You're so right, because it's just like the nature of the business, as we know, is like we're constantly hearing no and no and no. For me, I thought that there was something wrong with me. I actually thought there was I was broken
Mm,
because I wasn't rebounding from being fired. I wasn't rebounding from hearing all of these no's. It and so it's like everyone else is doing fine, which
right.
is completely
The
not true.
perception.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so how did you rewrite that narrative in your head then for yourself that you weren't broken? It wasn't
Uh,
you.
well, I started working with a coach. I went to a friend of mine because I was literally like at the end of my rope, and I've been in and out of therapy my entire adult life, and I just therapy wasn't helping me, and I didn't know what to do. And my friend Scott said, you know, talk to my coach. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, I don't play sports. Like, I was wildly confused.
Yeah.
And then I went and met with this lady, Mona Miller, who really changed my life. And tragically, she died. We were working together for about 8 months, and then she died in a car accident.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, and but this was so incredible because the last voicemail that she left me was, "You know more than you think you do. We'll talk on Tuesday." And I held that as a lifeline. And then that's when I started to look into training as a coach because I wanted to know more about what she did.
Yeah. That's incredible. I didn't know that that was the impetus for you to like start coaching and passing on that that knowledge. I'm sure she would be so proud of you with what you've done and how you've been able to help so many, like myself. You know, I speak for myself, but I'm sure everyone else that's been had the privilege to be in that space with you would say the same.
I
Yeah.
know that I felt like I didn't know if I was ready, but I certainly was willing and able. And I feel like my experience of working with you is that you're just like, you're always like so ready, willing, and able. And I think like one of your greatest tools in your tool belt is that you're so willing to look under the hood and
Mm,
say, okay, let me check this, let me tighten this, let me replace this valve. And it's just like minor adjustments in a way,
yeah.
so that, it's like thinking about like the wheels on a car, of just like, if they're deflated slightly, then they wear quicker. But if they're
Mm,
fully, they're properly filled up, then it just like everything runs smoother.
yeah.
And I feel
But
like
I,
coaching does that.
But I think it's important to note that just because you make the minor tweaks under the hood and you have the right tires, like what I've learned is it doesn't mean you're going to go any faster, right? Than like
Right.
the journey wants you to go. Like you're still going to go the speed limit, no matter
Yes.
how fast you think you can push things forward. And it's been such a lesson and a reminder in patience, because it's like that very thing that makes most producers incredible, that lack of patience, that sense of urgency for everything, is also the kryptonite that kills them, in other areas of their lives. And I speak for myself, where the struggle of that yin yang and that the ping pong of these ups and downs that I feel daily, basically, as you know, like
Yeah.
is because you can be doing all the things that feel and are perceived to be correct and still not getting any traction for what feels like weeks or months. And you just go, am I crazy? Like, am I insane for investing all of this time up front on the trust and faith, the blind faith that this is all going to pay off at some point down the line, financially, energetically, all of these things, And it's I think independent producing is such a unique thing that it takes a certain kind of a person. And I'm just like, how did I even get here? Because I don't even know,
Yeah.
like, I don't know if somebody had told me this, like, here's all the things, if I would have chosen this, you know what I mean? Because it's so hard, but it's so rewarding when it rewards you. It's so rewarding. And I think we hang on to the like moments of reward, and that's the little fuel in the engine that keeps you going through the times where it just, you're like, wow, like, how do I create this life for myself as a human and be a person who can be a storyteller, but still have a life, and be able to like have a savings account and retire one day, like all of these things that there is no path for that unless you stay in like a more corporate structure where you're an executive somewhere. But it's really interesting, and I sort of digressed altogether. Um but yeah, it's an important thing that I hope people take away. I kind of talk about it a lot on the pod, but if I had a little more insight into this in my early days, when I thought the impossible was possible left and right, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know if I would have chosen something differently. I mean, you
Yeah.
know,
I feel
yeah.
like you're touching and circling on something that is what like really was a transformational moment for me, which is knowing why.
Mm,
Why am I doing this? What's my life purpose? Because it's so difficult. It's so challenging. And if I'm chasing after validation, or if I'm chasing after a paycheck, which is important, if I'm chasing after awards, if I'm chasing, after commercial success, it's empty. It's not enough fuel in the fuel tank for me to be
yeah.
able to go the distance. And when I was able to finally discover that like my life purpose is so much about helping people across their finish lines.
Yes, which I love that line of yours,
Oh,
by the
thanks.
way. Yeah.
And so I'm able to do that as a producer, as a coach, as a professor, and so that has shifted everything. So now like the backpack doesn't feel as heavy, because
Mm.
I have this sense, like I have like this new source of fuel and energy to draw upon.
Yeah, and it's like you have only the precious stones in your backpack that you need. You don't have additional rocks weighing you down,
Yes, yes. And then of course it's like every once in a while I have to put the backpack down and like look through it and go, oh my God,
Oh
how did
wow,
I
this
pick
how
this
long
up?
has this been here? Yeah.
I know. It's
Just
like a
yeah.
dry, rotting apple or something. It's like,
Yeah.
whoops.
Yeah, but it's like it's the same metaphor, right? Of looking under the hood, looking in the backpack. You got to take inventory of like the stuff, the baggage that you're bringing on with you physically, mentally, emotionally, all of that stuff, because it is required to find that endurance for it, just the continuous forward momentum. Otherwise, I think it can be easy to get stuck in all of the ways that it is all of the ways that it can and does go wrong and doesn't propel you forward. I think it can be easy to get stuck in that. So I think it's important, but okay. So I want to back up just for a minute. So then 2008, all of this stuff, you have this awakening, and like, so catch us up to where you are today with K&L Productions and everything you've been able to do and meeting Kay and all of that stuff.
Yeah, so between then and now, I had my own production company. I wound up going to EPIX to be head of programming there, which was really informative. And then I wound up having my own production company again with a deal at Warner Horizon. And then I got a call about meeting with Denver and Delilah, which is Charlize Theron's company.
Yeah.
So I wound up going there for a couple of years. And that's how I met Kay, because we did the Netflix series GIRLBOSS together.
Yes.
And it was during that process that Kay and I just so fell in love and like have shared values, a shared work ethic. And I love working with writers and directors, and had been longing to have that type of partnership and that kind of intimacy. Because I'm not a screenwriter. It's like I write a blog, but it's not like I don't have a calling to write for the screen, but I have such a deep appreciation for it.
Yeah.
So Kay and I started our company a couple of years ago, and knock on wood, it's been going well.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have a first look deal with Sony, right?
Yes.
It's like impressive. Yeah. It's like all the things that, baby producers, well, maybe not baby, more like mid-level producers like me, like aspire to. And so I'm curious, like, to where you are now and, having these production companies. And I'd be curious if, did you stop and start them because maybe they just weren't working out at the time and you just had to shift your focus? And then was it the same company you were coming back to, or were you coming into each one with a different perspective and knowledge each time?
Well, the first two companies that I did by myself, I just have to share with you the name of the company that I had when I was doing it solo was Shibui, which is a Japanese word, which means beauty in the imperfect.
Oh, I like that. Kind of like Life with CACA, sort of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Shibui.
yeah, totally.
Okay. Yeah,
yes.
I dig.
But each time I left the company was to go, like one time was to go to EPIX, and then the other time was to go to Denver and Delilah. And now I feel like my big realization is I don't want to do it alone. It's just I love collaboration and I love the partnership. And as you've been saying, it's like it is challenging. And so to surround oneself with the people who believe in you, so we can bolster each other. Oh gosh, it's just so, at least for me, it's just like really, really important, because it's just too isolating and too lonely.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the sense of community, or the lack of community, I think, that exists with the independent producer hustle is something that I think is quite unfortunate, because we all feel this way, and the producing journey is very isolating, and it is a quite lonely one. And to even to share the successes, like, yeah, all your friends will want to go celebrate with you over drinks when you close a big deal or whatever, but no one's there when like you get the 24 consecutive no's, you know what I mean? And so it's like no one wants to meet up with you. That, well, some people may, but then you're like drinking too much and for the wrong reasons, and it's not healthy. But I do think it's like I talk about this a lot, and it's because I've learned that this is really ultimately all we have, and it's the journey, right, of like who we're going to go on that journey with, because the results and the outcome of anything is so outside of our control. And I think similarly to you, I'm at a point in my career where, in my pivot, that you've helped me sort of identify and start to create, it's like I want to have that partnership as well, because it is important to share the wins and the losses and the frustrations with someone. Because sometimes, at least for me, it's like I sit in this chair, especially now, all day, and I'm like, am I crazy? Like, it's like I need a sounding board, because you lose a little bit of touch with that reality, and having someone who can just kind of know the journey intimately, I think is very important. I have wonderful people in my life, but if you don't understand the producing sort of madness, it's kind of hard to speak to that. I think, to your point, I've also been in and out of therapy, but it wasn't until our coaching session that I was like, oh, like this is a person who really understands from a deeper place when I'm talking about feeling, rejected by something. They understand the depths of that rejection in a completely different way than a traditional therapist can guide and advise, because you've been on the inside, you've been in the trenches in many ways. And it's like we're speaking the same love language about the pain,
Yes, yes.
And it was like, oh, this is the first time I actually walk away from that exchange feeling like I have better tools to navigate this and understanding it, because so much of my adult identity is tied up in this, because it's all I've been doing for over a decade, and it's kind of hard sometimes to get others to weigh in, and everybody has wonderful positive things to say, like friends and family can help and say great words and send you memes and stuff like that. But I think only the people that kind of understand are cut from that same cloth, and it's like we're branded, you know what I mean? Like they get it, and it's like it calms you in a way where you're like, oh, okay, like I'm not crazy. Okay, this person's not emailing me back. It's not about me. Okay, right. I have to take these. Like it just helps you kind of recalibrate a little bit, so you don't get, at least for me, again, just speaking for myself, so I don't go a little stir crazy, getting caught up in all the nuances of the rejection.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you were talking, I was just flashing on how I had a strategy call yesterday with our team at WME, because it's such a tough marketplace right now. And they're like, okay, what do you need? And I said, I need perspective. I was like, I just need to know, like, what am I doing wrong? Or is everybody experiencing this? How do I need to course correct? Like, what's happening? And it's like the value of of our WME team is because they are working with so many different producers and artists, that I could get that snapshot perspective of no, you're not crazy. It's challenging.
Okay. That's good to hear. Yeah. So, and sometimes you're right. Sometimes it is like an industry wide phenomenon versus like just a one person thing. And then here you are internalizing it, taking it so personally, when it truly has nothing to do with you. It's just that we happen to be in a pandemic, and there's like nobody knows when and how you're going to successfully shoot anything for more than a couple of days,
Yeah. There's an incredible, just like really powerful analogy that came out of our conversation that I'd love to share with you. It's this idea that playing on a runway, and then fog is rolling in. And the fog is the pandemic, and the airplane is production. And it's like, okay, the plane can't take off, it's not safe. And then other planes are lining up behind that plane. And so the runway is jam packed with planes ready to take off.
Yep.
But nobody knows when they can take off. So in terms of new development, it's like, I can't clutter the runway.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, got it. And yet,
then, well, and then the bottleneck of like when it does clear up, who gets to take off first? That's what I wonder. Like it's scary now, but I think even a year, whenever it all kind of can resume a little bit more closer to what normal felt like, that is the concern. Like who gets to have first dibs at flying out? Is it the people that have been on the runway the longest, or is it the 747 that's coming in and towering over all your tiny little independent planes, that's going to like tower over you and get to take off? So
yes.
Nobody has the answer. It's a rhetorical question, but that's great. I'm glad you got that perspective and that it helped, hopefully.
I mean, it was like, it's a Band-Aid, it's like, okay, but it's better than nothing, it's
yeah. So then how has this time been for you? Aside from that, like how has being an independent producer in COVID times, how has that brought new light into priorities and values and just altered things for you, would you say?
Yeah, what a great question. It Well, I'm an overachiever, recovering perfectionist and recovering people pleaser, and so it's something that I really struggle with because so much of my self-worth comes from achievement and from doing.
Mm,
And so I've kept us incredibly busy during the pandemic, and we have not let up at all. So we have a lot of projects in development. We've been really fortunate to work with a handful of writers who have are willing to roll the dice with us and have been speccing material. And so a lot of that has been coming in, and now I'm just in the process of packaging. So like one of the silver
great.
linings of the pandemic is that people are reading, you know, so we're getting reads on our material, and we've been successful in some instances in being able to, you know, put stuff together. So, and then yeah, and I feel like, I mean, the other thing that I've personally been able to get into, which has been really helpful for me too, is just like writing my blog again.
Yeah.
And that's been helping me process all of my feelings of, uh, yeah, guilt, shame, embarrassment, you know,
All
all
the
of
fun
that.
stuff, all the fun
Yes.
party stuff. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how have you been processing it? Do you have any tips and tricks for listeners, aka myself?
You know, I have to tell you the thing that I just, that it's like it's I feel like it's risky because there's so much emphasis on perception. You know, like we touched on that earlier in our conversation. And so what I've been practicing and doing is just saying, "Fuck it," and being completely vulnerable and naked, and you know, posting these, you know, stories about myself.
Yeah.
And what's been so amazing is the response back. And so I can, and that it basically, it dissolves the shame that I feel because I'm not alone, but
Interesting.
I had to be the person to say, this is what I'm feeling, for other people to say, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too. And it's been really wonderful to be so vulnerable and then be validated in that vulnerability.
I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think this industry is built so much on perception and having to project a sense of confidence and assurance over things that are inherently like impossible to feel that confident about, because it just is, it's like a moving target. You can never, like, I think you look at our business, you can't even look at comps as to like what worked a year ago and this weekend. Like, people try to create these formulas for what success may be, but we all know internally that there is no such thing as that formula. Yet there's that expectation that you got to walk into a pitch, you got to walk into a room like you've got it all figured out. Like, it's like we're constantly selling a false sense of confidence to everybody, and we all know it. It's like we've all drank the Kool-Aid and we know this, and we're all like, frustrated about it, but then we keep playing the game. It's like, where does that come from, and why does it have
Yeah.
to be that way?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for you, and I
Yeah.
don't. Yeah,
It's
I've
more like,
got
yeah,
nothing. Yeah,
it's
because
wild. Yeah.
yeah, it's you know, because you and I've talked about this as well, of just like the best creative comes from going out on that limb, trying something, having a discovery process, the limb breaks, it's like free fall, and then, you know, it's like face plant, and then you learn something from that and you get back up and you climb the tree again. And it's like it's richer, it's fuller, and it's like risk taking equals incredible creative, and part of that risk taking is being vulnerable. and
Hmm.
and so yeah, it's like pretending that everything is wonderful, or it's, you know, it's all glossy and shiny. It completely negates the truth and the reality of life. And isn't storytelling supposed to be a reflection of life? So yeah, I find it
Yeah.
absolutely baffling, and I wish there
It,
was a good answer.
there is no good answer, and if anybody listening has the answer, please let us know.
Yes, I'd like
Please
to
let us
know.
know, because we don't claim to have the answers. I certainly don't. I'm on a mission of curiosity and talking to everybody who will give me time of day to hopefully get a little, 1%, not closer to the answer, but just understanding and finding all of these things that I wish I had in my journey early on. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's very interesting. And a bizarre business. I mean, for sure. I think to your point, like the more I've been able to be vulnerable and what you taught me and speak my truth and just say, here's all the things I know and here's what I don't know and here's what I actually need, the more that the response has been positive to that. But I think it's important to note that it takes tact and it takes being very specific with that. I don't mean you should just go around to everybody being like an emotional sort of like,
right,
you know,
exactly,
like this person, because nobody wants that. I think it's,
yeah,
you know, the way your life is shouldn't be no different than how you treat your business relationships in this business, where it is inherently an emotional business, but nobody wants to deal with that drama friend, right? Who's always got everything as a crisis, like everything is a big deal. Nobody wants to be at the mercy of that. So I think learning the differences between that, I think just sometimes takes time and patience. Ugh, that word.
yeah, exactly. And practice. You're so
Yeah,
right.
and practice.
It's not okay in any situation, personal or professional, to vomit one's feelings onto another human being. That's just,
Yes.
yeah, it's
I've learned the hard way.
Me too.
Oh God. I mean, okay. So this is one thing I was going to say. Now I remember that, you know, because of what you're saying, I'm so obsessed with like shining a light on these realities and these conversations that it's like, you know, you go be a guest at a panel and there's an audience who wants to hear from you as a producer, but you have to have project a certain type of whatever because you're talking to fellow writers or directors or artists. And we rarely get to actually talk about these realities of what it actually takes and the challenges and the messy parts of the journey. Well, because it's all messy, really. Like there isn't anyone's journey that is like, this happened and then that happened. I mean, at least if they exist, I have never met them, you know, I've yet to meet them. And I think it's so important to like lift a veil up from that, especially in the age of Instagram, where we can craft and curate whatever polished versions of ourselves we want others to see. And we all know it's a lie. We all know it's not a lie, but not the full picture, right? That it's not the full truth. Yet we still buy into it. We still can be affected by the image of whatever that person wants to project. And so I hope that through these conversations, it helps anybody listening who's on their path feel a little less alone in that, like, no one has the answer. We're all trying to figure it out and trying to be good people in the process, hopefully, you know. I think it's important to note that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's, as you were talking, I was just thinking about Glennon Doyle's Untamed.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, to me, she just like walks that walk of complete vulnerability, the difficulties, the challenges, but then she's also such a role model because she's so authentic about it, but she's got these skills and tools and she knows her purpose and she knows her values.
Yeah.
And,
but I think what's great about her is that even though she has all of that and one can say, wow, she's got it all figured out, she's very transparent about the messy parts and the fact that she doesn't have it figured out and she's still stumbling through so much of what she's trying to do. And I think that is the best thing anybody can be. If you have influence and show people that it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time, that it does come at certain expenses that you don't see. I think it's important to shine a light on that. Like, I think the more people can have a better understanding of the full breadth of it, especially when it comes to this elusive term of producing and what do producers do and what does that mean? Like the better and more compassionate of an industry, I think will create. I think there's a gap of these conversations not being had nearly enough in this intimate way. And I hope I can be a tiny part of like helping close that gap and helping create this new wave of like understanding and a new way of approaching the work.
Yeah, it's what I love so much about your podcast, and I'm so honored to be a part of it because I feel like you really make a stand for that truth and honesty and straightforwardness. And then what comes right on the heels of it is just empowerment and strength.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it. And I think it's because I live it. It's not just like a theory, you know, it's like, this is who I am. And I have found success being this way. Like everything you can see in Google of me and the things I've worked on has come through being that way to an extent. And the more I can redefine that for myself and make sure I stick to that, and hopefully show others that it too is possible for them. I think, to your point, like, I can hopefully lead the way for others to navigate this crazy business from that place of honesty and truth and integrity, and that it is all possible to do it in that, in you know, on your terms to that extent. Because at the end of the day, it's all you have. You have your one precious life and your non-renewable resource of your energy. And how do you want to spend that? And who do you want to be while you're spending that? I think sometimes there's that like desperation of like, I just need a producer. I just got to get my thing made. And it's like, is it the right person though to be on that journey with? Like, I think a lot of the terrible nightmare stories of Hollywood we hear about, it's because people didn't take the time, you know, to really just kind of think about that and process that. And maybe obviously things were probably different 20 years ago, and maybe it's a little too woo-woo, but I think people are really starting to realize that now more than ever with COVID, and like how precious it is and how nothing is guaranteed. We all know this, but now it's like proven. You think you have this is happening. I mean, how many agents and how many layoffs and furloughs have happened even at the big top players? Like, no one is impervious or impenetrable rather to the world, you know, and all the things that are going to happen. So, but I do want to ask, you know, since the show is about navigating these messy parts of our journeys and our lives, I think you've touched on it a bit, but I'd be curious if you could dive a little deeper into, you know, when you've gone through these lulls in your career, the big ones and maybe the smaller sort of ones that happen maybe on a daily level, like for me, how do you navigate that, and how do you get through to the other side? Because clearly here you are, 20 plus years of a career, still pushing forward, still positive. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's Seth Godin, he's a marketing guru. He has a book called, I think I'm going to butcher the title, but basically it's the idea of, is it the dip or quit? And I feel like I am constantly confronted by that of like, is this just a lull? Is this just an ebb moment? Or is it actually time to quit? And I feel like I keep going back to that idea for me of just, am I living my purpose? Am I honoring my values? And sometimes I'm not, and it's like I'm chasing after, like my Achilles heel is this need for external validation. I just like, I want someone to be like, oh, you're doing such a good job, attaboy, I can see how hard you're working. It's like I need to be like the good student, and then that just really screws me up. And then I lose sight of like, why am I really doing this? And so it's like being fired from CBS and then having Mike Newell's company lose its funding. And then at EPIX, I was a premature hire. They weren't really ready to move into scripted programming. So I was there for a little over 2 years, and then we parted ways amicably. And there was a big chunk of time left on my contract. So I actually got to just sort of figure out how I wanted to, like what I wanted to do next. But I also felt like a failure too. It's like that I couldn't make things happen, even though I know that it was so out of my control. I didn't, you know, have control over the purse strings, excuse me. But the how I get through it is just really is checking under the hood. I'm like, yeah, it's like, what's important to me. And also I think making an important distinction about, sometimes I make very grandiose statements of like, I need this, like, I need people to respect me. I need people to respond to me. Do I really? No. Like, do I want that? Yes. But I don't really need that. And so I conflate that. And so if I can slow things down enough to unpack that and go, okay, what do I really need? And the truth is I need very, very little. I need oxygen, I need food, I need, you know, some shelter, and I need the love of my family and friends.
Yeah. I mean, that's beautifully said. I think you're right. Like, we can confuse the want and the need very easily. And maybe that is the point of life, is like you crack the level when you can actually know for real the distinction between the two. Yes. And you're not confusing them. And I think our society likes to try to confuse you as much as possible.
Yes.
to
Yes.
sell you stuff, you know,
Yeah.
that you don't need, that you want, but you don't need. It's like the
Yeah.
opposite. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And so then from when you started coaching, how long has it been that since you've been coaching, and talk a little bit more
Um,
about
yeah, I
that?
think it's been about like 6 or 7 years, so a chunk of time, and I gotta tell you, it has transformed who I am as a producer, because my training as an executive was that, in order to justify my job, I'd have to identify a problem, and then, "This is how you're gonna fix the problem," and it's like, "Woo, I'm a hero." And the core, you know, the primarily the CBS culture that I had worked in, it was a culture of fear. So it was always like, oh my God, I have to justify myself, I have to rationalize myself, all of that. As my training as a coach is that people are creative, resourceful, and whole. Nothing is broken, nothing needs to be fixed. And so I apply that to my work as a producer so that when I'm developing with writers, creative, resourceful, and whole. Nothing is broken, nothing needs to be fixed. My job as a coach is to help my clients access their own inner wisdom. My job as a producer is to help the writers and directors that I work with access their vision. And
Mm,
so sometimes like we have to work through like a little bit of PTSD or some trauma, because you know we've all had situations where things have gone south, and then it's like, oh, I don't want to take that creative risk because I'm afraid that I'm going to get fired, I'm afraid that you're going to judge me negatively. And
mm,
so a lot of the space that I try to create is one of safety and security, so people can get back to, artists can get back to taking creative risks and not being penalized for it. And
yeah.
once I started employing those philosophies of a coach into my work as a producer, oh my gosh, it's like my batting average skyrocketed. It's like I
Amazing.
started setting stuff up all over the place. I wasn't
Yeah.
anticipating the marketplace. I was trusting my instincts, not so much in terms of, oh, I think that this writer is like just so extraordinary that they're going to be wildly successful. It's like, oh, I'm trusting my instincts that that writer and I, like, that we can be, like we can work together, that there's like magic in terms of that chemistry and that synergy, like we, that we're each other's people and we can have each other's back.
Yeah. And at what point did you identify and then have been so wonderful at highlighting this idea of grief and loss in the business and helping others navigate that? Because I know when you coached me and we talked about that, it was like, you know, like someone kicked a door into a place I'd never like knew was possible. And it made so much sense to look at it from that perspective. And I literally tell everybody, it's like, I worked with this coach and she talks about the business from a place of grief, and everybody's like mind blown because it's so true. So how did you identify that? And how has it, since you identified it, how have you seen that maybe have a similar effect on others that you've coached?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It was through being coached and learning that loss is loss. And you know, and as you know said earlier, it's like in terms of trauma, it's not really fair to compare. Like, oh, I feel sadder than you do. You
Right.
know, like I have a younger, I have a 10-year-old daughter, and she's like, no, I'm hungrier than you. Oh no, I'm more afraid than you. I was like, you can't compare. And so when I was in my recovery process from being fired from CBS, and I started to understand that, oh no, this actually is loss. This is real trauma. That that was incredibly healing. And then through the process of training as a coach, I realized that I could actually share the story with other people. And it's again like posting my blog and just being vulnerable of like, yeah. And when I start a new relationship, we do this thing called like designing an alliance, where I just ask people, like, you know, what sets you up for success, what makes you grumpy, what's important to you. And I do the same. And oftentimes what comes out of those conversations are stories of loss, of like my last project, I got canceled, or I, you know, worked my ass off on the spec and then the producer never even took it out. You know, it's like those types of stories are being shared and told.
And I think the healing from that is what can um, avoid or help someone avoid becoming a cynical, bitter person who then I can very easily become an asshole, you know, like from that place of pain and loss and grief that hasn't really been identified. I do think a lot of
Yeah.
the people that bring fear to their workplace, they're coming from that from something along those lines. And if you were to ask them and have an honest response, I think you would find the similar stories for all of them. Somebody screwed them over, someone they trusted, someone that they went all out for and worked for no money for, you know, all of that stuff. It's such a business of relationships. And so I think it's like we have these tiny marriages or affairs, to however you want to define it, you know, like if you're on doing a short little sprint, you're just having like a one night stand, but it's all these relationships that do, I think, define us and how we navigate through them. And there's not enough emphasis put on that. I think people think of relationships like the surface level. Well, I got to get drinks with every agent in town and I got to have everybody know my name. And that's one part of it, but like better to have like 5 incredible deep relationships with people who are all going to be gateways to other people than think you're going to have deep relationships with 100 people. Like we all know that's not possible or sustainable. So I think navigating that is very important. I know I suffered from that my early days because I didn't go the agent route. I sort of just have always been in the trenches of doing my own solo thing. But I remember being like, all right, I got to have every night this week. And I was in my early 20s. I got to have drinks with someone new. I got to be meeting people. I got to be talking shop and this and that. And it's like, yeah, but at what expense? Like you're not developing anything. Maybe 1 or 2 of those become something substantial, but mostly not, you know? And it was a very interesting way that I had of thinking, this is how I build relationships. And time proved to me like, no, you're going about it the wrong way. It's not going to be as effective as you think it is, you know, putting your eggs in that basket. Like that's not going to manifest itself. It's like the people that are your peers now, the people that are sort of like on that same journey with you that are going to grow. I think that's where you should put your primary focus, as opposed to the people that you think are over there that are playing a different game altogether. It sometimes feels like, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would add to that of just developing relationship skill, that it's not something that we're taught in school. And, you know, it's why the divorce rate is so high. It's why I do think that there, you know, are so many relationships in the entertainment industry. Well, also, you know, probably in all industries, but that have fallen apart is not because necessarily it was a bad relationship, but it's because both people lacked skill in how to be in relationship. And it's absolutely normal that there will be conflict. There's going to be miscommunication. There's going to be misunderstanding. Memory is imperfect. And so it's like, oh, wait, I thought you and I talked about this. And it's like, and then I get mad at you. And it's like, well, you know what? Maybe I'm just remembering it incorrectly.
Yeah.
And so, which was like one of the biggest things that I had to deal with, is that, wow, my memory is flawed. And so like, I would get so mad at people because I'm sort of OCD and so as I started to develop real relationship skill, is like, I learned how to be able to communicate my upset with someone without canceling them.
That is beautiful. I think that is like, if there's one skill set that I think is worthwhile of an investment, it's that. And I don't know, aside from like your coaching, how you get that, like how you train people to build and sustain real relationships in the business, because it is so different than personal relationships and friendships, but it isn't in many ways. It's like some people you're friendly with, but you're not friends with. Like there's all of these differentiating levels of what the relationship means. And it's only so good if both people have the same understanding of what that relationship is, right? Because if I think we're friends and you're like, oh no, she's just like a person who worked for me once, I'm gonna have a very different perception of how I'm going to interact with you, and get potentially very frustrated if I don't get that same thing back, because I perceive you in a certain way. I perceive our friendship in a certain way. And you may look at me and think, oh, that's just like a person that is just like here and there once in a while. And I'm like, I want this to be my forever person. You know, it's that disconnect. And I don't know. I don't know if you've cracked the code in that and how you can teach that on a bigger scale than like a one-on-one consulting, or if it takes enough heartbreak to finally be like, all right, I'm ready to learn the skills and look under my own hood and see how I can show up and be better to my fellow collaborators, you know?
Yeah. I want to recommend 2 books. One is Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication.
That just came up yesterday for me. So amazing. Yeah.
Great.
Serendipitous.
It's an incredible book. It's sort of an unfortunate title, because when you hear nonviolent communication, it's like the image is like, oh my God, people, you know, fisticuffs. That's not it at all. It's a powerful book, highly recommend. And then, oh my gosh, I just blanked on the second book I wanted to share, which is, I just lost it. But highly recommend the Nonviolent Communication book for sure.
Yeah, it'll come to you. Yesterday, I was listening to Tim Ferriss interview Sia, and she said so many things that are sort of like sort of eerie, mirroring our conversation, where she talked about, even with someone of her stature, like when she stepped into wanting to direct, she had a lot of trepidation because she didn't want to be judged by the industry, by the film industry, and be like, oh, here's another like music person thinking they can come in and direct a movie and all of this stuff. And she was the one who talked about what is the book called? It's Nonviolent.
Nonviolent Communication.
Nonviolent Communication, and how that transformed her life. And Sia has been very vocal about suffering from depression and suicidal thoughts. And she's actually had tried to kill herself a couple of times. And she talked about this idea that it's not the death of the body that a person in pain seeks, it's the death of the ego. And I think humans get a little confused between the two. And if they can only heal the ego, they'll realize like you don't have to like kill your physical body to get rid of the pain. And I just was like blown away by that. But yeah, she brought up that book. I don't know if my tangent helped you remember the title, but if not, you can text it to me later. And did you remember it? Okay.
Well, it's a way of communication that's really powerful. It's called Imago Dialogue. It's IMAGO, and people can just Google it, and there are workshops, but you can learn about it online as well. And it's a way of communicating that's just transformative.
Yeah. Incredible. I mean, I can't believe we're almost at an hour. So I'm trying to think of like, how do I even wrap this up with you? Like, what note do we leave this on? I think you shared so much incredible stuff.
I'd love to end with asking you a question.
Oh,
yeah.
This is different.
Good times.
Okay,
I just, just in that spirit of vulnerability, what is your greatest challenge today?
Like today specifically in this moment, or today as in like
I'm going to say today. Life? Yeah, I'm going to say, let's go with both.
Okay. My greatest challenge today, I'd say it's a daily challenge. So it just feels like par for the course, which is like navigating my own expectations of how quickly I'd like things to move and not always knowing how much to push. So for example, a thought that comes to mind is, we're out to an actor to attach on one of my scripts. And as you're talking about your experience with WME, I start getting a lot of anxiety, and I'm like, oh my God, as soon as I get off the call with Laverne, like I gotta talk to them and be like, hey guys, it's been 2 weeks. We've been waiting for, like we said, okay. And can I make another offer if it's not exclusive? Like I start kind of spiraling a little bit, and these are the next things I need to do to keep things moving forward always. And so that is a challenge, to be like, is this actually real momentum I need to put behind it? Or is this like, what is the why? Or is this coming just from a place of like anxiety because things are happening without me, that FOMO I need to like also be a part of making sure, I'm like, what if the agencies start going out of business and no one wants to finance it? Like I start going to all of that place. So that I would say is a daily challenge. And it's like, it's almost like levels. It's like, it's always there. Sometimes it's like imperceptible, and sometimes it's so high that I just can't even think of anything else. So there's undulations to that. But yeah, I would say that I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I think through the work that we've done, I've gotten a lot better in really defining the saboteurs in my brain and in all areas of my life, and really trusting, like you've taught me, that I am enough and that I am doing enough. And it's like the 4 agreements, it's like, if you can do your best every day and go to bed knowing that you did your best with what you could, you're never going to get all the things done on your to-do list. Then that is enough, and I think a lot of people in my life, I'm grateful that they hold up mirrors to me and remind me that enough for me is usually like a lot for most people. Like my threshold for what is a lot in a day, like what I do in a day, a lot of people do in a week. And I'm not saying that because I'm like, look at me. It's like, I've had friends be like, wait, that was you did that in one day. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I'm still going. And they're just like, that's crazy. So just really identifying that and being able to take a step back and think, okay, like I am doing enough and I am enough and it's all going to happen in the way it's supposed to. Like so much is not in my control. So then all I have is how I'm going to show up to the challenges and give myself permission for the days where I just want to be a whiny little bitch about it all, and that it's okay, you know, have a little pity party, like the time we connected on the phone, and just be like, woe is me and life sucks, and then move on. But the truth is, it's like you said, you know, you have to come back to your why, and nobody's holding a gun to our head saying, you have to be a producer, you must do this. Like, so you can leave at any point and go do something else. And if it gets to the point where you want to do that, then do that. But if you're not, then really weigh in, like to your point, is this just a momentary dip or is this a much bigger thing? And I think discerning the two is the lifelong quest. But so far, 14 years into this business, I'm still here. I still feel passionate about it. I still love it most days. And I still feel inspired. And I think the podcast honestly has been like therapy for me. It reminds me, in hearing other people's journeys, like, I'm not alone. You know, others have gone through similar or worse or better. It doesn't matter. It's not about equating, but they're still here. They're still showing up. They're still coming at me with a smile on their face and guiding me and mentoring me. And like, gosh, what a privilege that I get to have these conversations and hopefully give a little bit of that to the people that are listening. So
yeah,
that's my answer.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love the flag that you're planting and how you show up so consistently and in the best possible way, just like being absolutely relentless.
Yeah, I just don't know any other way. It's just one of those things, you know, like if I figure out a different way of being, I'd be open to that. But so far in my 30 some years of life, like this is all I know. And I'm, you know, thriving in it. And like I said, I focus on the gratitude as much as I can, because I also recognize that we're living through a very challenging time, and the kinds of champagne problems I have are the good kinds of problems to have. You know, I'm struggling over like trying to get stories made, not some other bigger things that other people are having to deal with in this moment. So putting it in perspective, I think, is important. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I do believe it's like, just, I may not be at my best, but I'm doing the best that I can.
That's right. And that's all any of us can do. And I think that's important. I think, yeah, I hope that everybody takes that away and like actually keeps that in their heart and remembers that. So, but I just adore you. I'm obsessed with you. I think you're such a blessing. And I love how you came into my world in such a peculiar way. It's always fascinating to me. To be like, wait, this person's been around for 20 years and I'm just hearing of them? What do you mean? You know? And so I'm grateful to you for sharing your time and your story and your wisdom with me and the listeners. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I adore you too. And this has been just such a treat. And I've loved listening to your podcast. It helps me through my down days.
Good. Oh, that's what I want. If everybody can be helped through their down days through these conversations, then I am #winning for sure. So awesome.